Welcome to the Free Birth Podcast, a supportive space for people who are learning, exploring, and celebrating their autonomous choices in childbirth. Together, we'll unpack truths, share personal stories, and claim our ability to birth freely and intuitively. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
Do you know it's your calling to become an authentic midwife? Do you dream of attending women in birth? Have you felt frustrated trying to be a birth worker in the system? Are you looking for a better way to walk with women in total integrity, supporting mother-led physiological birth? Are you dreaming of building a thriving, profitable business as a birth coach? Well, we are thrilled to announce that enrollment for our Radical Birthkeeper School is now open. Classes begin June 1st, so head over to our website and get the details. The time is now, and we need you to join us in this birth revolution. www.radicalbirthkeeperschool.com. This week, I have Kate on the show, who shares her story of leaving behind her doula career for something that felt more in alignment with her integrity, midwifery outside the system. Kate tells us the gorgeous story of the birth of her own daughter and how her radical birth work as a birthkeeper informed her decisions to have the birth of her dreams. All right. I am excited for this episode today. I'm here with my friend Kate from Canada. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Kate from Canada.
Canada.
That's your title. So this is a part of this thing I'm really excited about, that I'm doing this Radical Birthkeeper series. And so, the intention of it is to follow 3 different women in 3 different countries and get to know the stories of how you came to be kind of this title that we're all playing with, a radical birthkeeper. So if you do follow the show, you already probably know what that is. And that's part of what we're going to get into today. So why don't you just start us wherever you want to start us, at wherever the beginnings of your beginnings are and like I said before we were recording, I actually don't know much of your story. So, I don't know if you served in the system and then left, or if you've always been working, more traditionally. So we're just going to do a deep dive today on Kate's story. And my hope is that it inspires many of you to know that there really are paths and options available to you if you are one of the frustrated birth workers in the system, that there really is a life beyond it if you want to find it. So yeah, hi, where do you want to start?
Hey, amen to that. There is a life beyond it. I did work inside of the system. So yeah, I am a radical birthkeeper up here in Canada. I live on the East Coast in Nova Scotia. I cheekily go by the term midwitch because it feels cheeky and sassy and honest to me also. My journey really started, I think, a long time ago. And one benefit that I had growing up, I think, is that my mom really talked about her birth experiences quite positively. She did have quite a traumatizing first birth, but her 3 births after that she described mostly as like quiet and peaceful and just not really needing anyone to help her in any way. They were in hospitals, but it was just sort of very normal and not loaded with a lot of other stuff, which I think kind of set me up.
Sure.
I grew up in a family that talked a lot about health and medicine. My dad is a doctor, actually. So I grew up really interested in health, and I've always navigated towards women. And so I was interested in women's health when I was in my early 20s. And this idea, like someone like said midwife to me, and it was like this awakening inside of me, like, oh yeah, I just remembered that exists. Like I had been thinking about medicine. I had been thinking about obstetrics and gynecology. It wasn't resonating with what I knew about the
Can you imagine?
I can't even. I would have been kicked out so fast.
Yeah.
It's just
they would have taken one look at you and just went, no.
Out. Get out of here. No.
That's funny.
So it was like, I'm interested in this thing, but I don't know another framework for it outside of medicine, and medicine doesn't resonate with me, even just like watching my dad growing up and his friends and colleagues and knowing about med school and all of that. So yeah, one day someone said like midwife, there's this midwife training. And yeah, it was like a light bulb. It was totally an awakening and a remembering that midwives exist, something else exists. And at that time also, I was just out of university. I was kind of like switching gears, not wanting to work in the field that I had studied in university. And I started nannying for this really cool woman who had 5 kids. She was a family doctor and her husband was a doctor as well. But after the birth of her first son, she had become totally disenchanted with the medical system, left her practice and became a doula, and then went on to have 4 more
that's
kids.
a trip.
I know, right?
From doctor to doula. That's a book right there.
Doctor to doula, like so cool. And so when we started chatting, when I started working for her, she said, well, if you're interested in midwifery, you should try out being a doula, like see what it's like going to births, see if you like being on call, get to know kind of the insides of it. And where I live, we're lucky, and there are some downfalls, I think, also, to have this really well-established volunteer doula program, which is like very cool, was totally groundbreaking when it started, has been internationally recognized. Hilary Marentet is one of the women who started it, and she's totally brilliant. So I got to do this 12-week doula training for free in exchange for volunteering for this program. And so that gave me like an inside look kind of at what midwifery could be.
How many years ago are we at this point?
At this point, this was 2010. So 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did this training, and coming out of it, I volunteered at births for about 1.5 years. And
all in hospital.
At the time we had, in 2008, midwifery was regulated in my province. So at this point we had regulated midwives, but at that time, like 1.5 years into my doula journey, there was this stop hold put on the midwifery program here, and no home births were being attended by midwives, and we didn't actually have enough midwives to attend home births because they had quit, been fired. It's kind of a hostile work environment. So I was like, oh man, like this was kind of what I was driving towards. Like, I'm putting in time in the hospital, and eventually I'll have a name, and maybe we'll get hired to be at these home births. And then there was like a stop put on it. So that was hugely disappointing. So I kept practicing in the hospital and started practicing privately, being hired by women to work in the hospital. But I just became so disenchanted with the system myself. And as I continued to study on my own, because I had this passion for women's health and birth and was drawn to home birth, I kept kind of studying on my own in those fields. And the more I learned, the harder it was to go to those hospital births, because I was seeing the trauma that I was blind to before. I was seeing the lies that were being spun for these women. I was totally seeing how the experiences were being reframed, and how the internalized misogyny was just like really playing out heavily in that field. So 3 years into that journey, I said, no more, I won't do it. And I'm done with this.
Tell me more about that. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, before that, I had applied to midwifery school. So midwifery in Canada, they're 4-year university programs. You have to have an undergrad to get in. So it's lots of school. and they're heavily medical in their curriculum. I had applied to a university midwifery program, and at the same time that my interview was happening for that program, there was a release put out in BC on the opposite coast of where I live in Canada. And the release came from the College of Midwives, and it said something, I'm totally paraphrasing, but it said something along the lines of, it's irresponsible to hire a traditional birth attendant instead of a regulated midwife.
Right. We don't make money off of that.
Exactly. Ladies, hire regulated midwives. And this was
we're in control.
Exactly. We manage that. Us, our territory. And so when I read that headline, I again was awakened to this idea, I thought that a midwife was a traditional birth attendant. I wasn't aware of an underground movement at that point. I wasn't aware that there was a difference. I wasn't aware of this regulation struggle that had been going on for a long time. And so that headline totally opened my eyes to that struggle of regulated midwifery. So I didn't get into the midwifery program anyway, and it was a blessing, because at that point I was like, I can't do this at all anymore. What's the end game? I don't want to be a doula going to hospital births. There are no home births happening in the province where I live that I know of. No home births happening in quotes, right? And I don't want to be a midwife because
it's all a lie.
It's a lie.
Right. Exactly. It's like they say it's apples, but really it's oranges.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So at that point I was like, I'm done. I proclaimed, I'm done. And it was sad.
Yeah.
It was like a passion. It felt like I worked a full-time job on the side of volunteering for years, and then also worked a full-time job on the side of taking very little money to attend births. And I cared so deeply about the women. I felt that the work was so important, but I knew that I couldn't handle it anymore. My heart, my psyche, it wasn't in alignment with me, and I couldn't do it anymore. And that felt so sad.
How did you navigate? I mean, if it came up, because it's something that definitely has for me and many, many doulas that I know, how did you kind of navigate that shift out of, but at least I'm there. At least she has somebody to hold her hand and to witness her, that hero persona that we're all trained to be, not just as women, but then double down on in a doula training and in doula culture. How did you kind of navigate what for so many women, so many doulas I talk to, they are so willing to continue on in this messed up dynamic because they feel so guilty, and they're like basically willing to frame it as, I'll take it, I'll keep going because she deserves somebody. How did you deal with that?
I think it happened kind of quickly for me because I had one particular experience at a birth that was so awful. I really felt like I didn't help in any way.
Right.
I was there beside her. I did hold her hand. I did yell no to the doctor who cut the cord of her baby, the umbilical cord, immediately as she was saying no. I was there, but I could see afterwards I didn't help in any way. I had no way to help. I had no agency being there in that system. And it was just such a fight. And then it really, I was waking up in from my sleep in flashbacks to the birth, but fantasy flashbacks of what I would do to those doctors if I wouldn't be charged with assault or something like that. Throwing people across the room in my dreams, actually. And that's when I was I realized I can't do this because I'm not going to be mentally well enough to go into these situations anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then how does that shift your practice? You withdraw from volunteering.
Yep.
And what happens?
I withdrew from volunteering. When women got in touch, I said, I'm so sorry, I'm not attending births anymore. And then, like I said, it was like an awakening when midwifery first came into my psyche, back into my psyche. And then again, eventually one really persistent woman who I met and had a great connection with, who was pregnant with her third baby, was like, well, I really want to encapsulate my placenta. And no one that I knew was making placenta remedies at the time. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. And she was like, please be at my birth. And please, like, will you process my placenta? I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. She was like, I totally trust you. Just do it. You've got this. And it was that connection with a woman that brought me back in, a strong and powerful woman who had given birth at home twice already and was like, I feel very confident. And this birth was actually in a hospital. And it was...
Why?
There was this stop hold on home birth, no regulated midwives, right? And she didn't know of any underground midwives.
Okay. And she wouldn't birth with that one.
Yeah. She didn't want to birth with that one. So she had a regulated midwife. They were going to go to the hospital. She walked to the hospital. I met her there. Her baby was born in a couple of hours and she tried to walk home and they wouldn't let her. Whoa. So she had her mother come and pick her up actually with a borrowed car seat so that they would let her leave. And then I had her placenta. And so I dove into like, how do I process this placenta, and found a really cool woman in my province who I didn't know, who was making placenta remedies. And she was really generous and shared knowledge with me so openly, in a way that I had not encountered with regulated midwives. And it felt so open. And then just searching on the internet, I processed this placenta. And then I thought, this can be my offering. I won't attend births anymore. I don't want to go back into the hospital anymore, but this making placenta remedies can be my offering to the women in my community. And so I became the placenta lady here in Halifax for a long time, and was, processing a lot of placentas, sometimes 2-3 placentas a week. It got busy. And that became my offering to the community for about a year and a half, until I had another calling, an even deeper calling, another woman. And again, it was just meeting a really rad woman who I had a deep connection with right from the start, and who this time was like, I'm going to give birth at home by myself. You might as well just come, make me tea, be here. I like you. Just come. I'll pay you. She was just so persistent. I'll pay you. Cute. Come. Come on. So it was this next calling, deeper calling. All these layers of deeper and deeper callings in this work that just seems to deepen over all of the years, continually, even now. And that birth was really, the connections I made through that birth were really what were the catalyst into where I am now.
And was it obvious for you to say yes to that? Or were you like, no? Or was it oh my God, I've been waiting for someone who wants to just do her thing?
Yeah. It was the full body yes that you describe. It was I can't say no. I have to say yes.
So tell me about that dynamic a little bit more. How did you know in your own body that she could be trusted and that she wasn't going to blame you if there was a bad outcome? And how did you navigate all the stuff that we know doulas and midwives fear so much?
Totally. I don't know if I had any tangible indications of that stuff other than my gut feeling. And
there was just obvious trust.
Obvious trust and obvious trust resonating from this woman, radiating from this woman. And she had given birth once before with traditional midwives in Hungary. So she felt very confident, in her own birthing ability. It was more just I don't want to be alone. My husband's not going to make the tea right. Come on.
And it wasn't I need you.
Right. It wasn't I need you. It was I would prefer to have someone there with me.
Gosh, what a difference, huh?
Huge difference. Yeah, it wasn't I need someone to catch the baby. I need someone there if there's a shoulder dystocia. I need someone there if there's a hemorrhage. It was just it's good to have sisters around. Yeah. And then
so that's your first birth without a medical provider, right?
It was. And through that birth, so I said yes. And then I said yes, and I know about these I've heard about these traditional midwives in New Brunswick, where our neighboring province, where there isn't regulation on midwifery. And I would love to like get in touch with one of them, and like maybe there's some way for her to support this birth as well, and I could learn from her, because I don't really, at the time I was like, I don't know anything. So I did get in touch with one of these traditional birth attendants in New Brunswick. She ended up being on that journey with me and that woman, and she's the woman who I ended up apprenticing with for 1.5 years after that. That birth was like, it felt like a really potent initiation into this work. It didn't go how any of us thought that it would. The mother, so healthy, like so vibrant, so beautiful. One of my best friends now, her baby actually ended up dying at 38 weeks in utero.
Oh.
And she gave birth to her 2 days later.
Oh, at home.
She gave birth in the hospital. We didn't know at the time what to do with the body of an infant.
Wait, so how did she know the baby had passed?
She stopped feeling her move, and she had this feeling that something was off. Her belly started to feel heavy. She described it as a dead weight. So after about a day of, drinking coffee, drinking orange juice, doing some movement stuff, and still not feeling anything, she went into the hospital and had an ultrasound done, and now there was no heartbeat.
And then was induced?
She received, 1 dose of Cytotec. She went home. She skipped this. They wanted her to come back in, 6 hours later or whatever. She skipped it. Stayed home and induced further with some herbs, and then went into labor at home and went back to the hospital a couple of hours before the baby was born.
Was there an open discussion around why not birthing at home with a woman who was so comfortable doing it with a live baby?
Yeah, I was so grateful for that. I wouldn't have known how to have that conversation, and I do think at that time in my practice, I wouldn't have even approached the conversation. But because this experienced traditional birth attendant was with us, she did say, you can do this at home. You don't have to go into the hospital. But for that mother at the time, I think it really felt like, what am I going to do with my baby's body after they're born? Like, what do I do
Like,
after
even
that?
logistically, yeah.
The logistics were the hang up, which now has, that also was a catalyst to learning more about like, okay, what are our rights in this area?
Yeah.
How do we deal with these things?
Yeah, I remember learning when I lived in California, because I ran a nonprofit that gave support to women having non-live birth outcomes. So it was largely supporting abortion, but also often stillbirth. And I remember being so struck with realizing that it is within a parent's legal rights to not only birth the child at home, but also to bring the child home after the hospital. But that, like, if you do go into the hospital for the birth, that it is your legal right to bring your baby home. But it has to be facilitated by a funeral director. Like, the handoff has to be facilitated by a licensed funeral director, but that nobody gives that option. And so many women experiencing loss in the system are told that the only way is baby's out, you get some time with baby, and then it goes to the coroner, and then it's prepped for a service. And just, how it was so gutting to learn that wasn't actually, that there were actual options, and that you could have in-home funerals and in-home services, and that there's all these ways to keep the body cool in the home so that it slows down the decomposing, so that you can be with the baby for a couple days, and just all these other ways that might be more in alignment with what the parents wanted, but they're not even given those options anyway.
Of course.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, these things that we never even think about, right? Until we're faced with the situation, and then we have no idea where to go. Yeah, having resources for these. Yeah, and it just really, it bonded the three of us together really strongly. It also, like I said, felt like this huge initiation. Like, okay, so you want to do this work. If you're going to be involved with birth in its raw power, you are going to be involved with death in its raw power.
This was your first death?
This was my first death.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So it not only was your first death, but it was also your first birth outside the system.
Exactly.
At the same time.
At the same time.
Wow. Well, I mean, it wasn't outside the system eventually, but it was
Right.
intended to be and then shifted.
Exactly.
Yeah. Big initiation. That's a great word for it.
Huge. And it catapulted this apprenticeship that I did with this great traditional birth attendant. And, of course, like the next birth that we went to together, it was like the other side. It was kind of like, okay, you had your initiation and now we're going to throw you a bone, like beautiful fourth baby born at home in a farmhouse in the rural countryside. And we sat in the hallway until there was something for us to do, like make tea or scrambled eggs, right? Like just so perfect. And the apprenticeship was great. I think like I get a lot of requests and interest in apprenticeships, women wanting to apprentice with me. And I always feel like there's sort of this expectation, like there will be lots of births, like I'll be going to a birth every week. And, my apprenticeship was nothing like that. We went to, over the course of a year and a half, like, less than a dozen births together. 6, 7 births, something like that. The women who choose this are few and far between. And so it's not a busy thing. But being at those births taught me so much, just witnessing the women quietly from the hallway or from the far side of the room. And in the aftermath glory of their powerful births, making them food and seeing the excitement of their kids and watching their partners transform. And then also after leaving the houses, sitting and having debriefs about the birth with the woman I was apprenticing with. I just learned in that year and a half, like so much more than I learned in 3 years of attending births in the hospital. It's unfathomable. It's so different. So different. And then, after about a year and a half, eventually the births that I attended during the apprenticeship, interestingly enough, were mostly women having their like 3rd, 4th, 5th baby. And then after that year and a half, when I started attending births by myself outside of the system, most often it was first time mom. So it was like this new territory again.
Super new. Totally. Yeah. But does it ever end?
Never.
It's always new territory in so many ways.
Always new territory. And I have found, like even 10 years into this birth journey, 7 years into this outside the system birth journey and radical birth keeping, still in this past year, I felt like another new initiation happened. I really like how Sister Morningstar is one of my teachers, and she puts it really well. The village midwife is involved in the births, the deaths, and everything in between. It's not just a couple prenatal meetings and a birth and dropping off a meal afterwards. And I really felt that this past year when a family I had journeyed with through birth twice had a huge sudden loss in their family, a death. And I was called in again in a new capacity to...
It wasn't the child that died?
No, it wasn't the child that died. It was the father that died. And it was this new journey of being alongside those women as they went through this other transition. So it's just like, it's beautiful. So ever evolving.
Well, and it's one of the most offensive reductions of midwifery that we've seen happen in obstetrical midwifery, that it is seen and created and sold to women as a very, very, very compartmentalized role, that you just do some prenatals and, are there for the birth, and usually not for much of the birth, just like doctors. And then you do a couple postpartum visits if it's a home birth midwife, which now are getting even more few and far between. And that's it. You're done. Call me again when you're pregnant again. There's no village element to it. They're not calling them when there's other things going on. Like that's such a beautiful way to highlight one of the many differences of authentic midwifery.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like the conscious conception journey. There's so
Mm-hmm.
much there. The awakening into our fertility journey. There's so much there. The transitions out of breastfeeding, like throughout motherhood. Um,
So
yeah.
how does this go on to influence what then becomes your turn to become a mother?
Yeah, my turn to become a mother. I gave birth to my daughter almost 2 years ago. She'll be 2 in May. Um, I think I just felt so lucky because I had put in, 5 or 6 years at that point of being really dedicated to building sisterhood and community here and witnessing powerful birth and the freedom that that gave me from, like, my vision was clear, when I got pregnant or when I set out to get pregnant, there was never a question in my mind of what kind of care I would receive, or if I would get testing done or anything like that, just kind of what my journey would be like. It felt like a really integrated part of my life. Like, this will be a continuation. So I got pregnant, and yeah, that, first trimester, blah, awful. I was attending births. I was so tired.
You were?
I was.
Ooh, I could not have done that.
It was a
Ooh.
challenge.
Yeah, wow.
It was a challenge. I would attend with a second person, so there was help there. I rested a lot. My circle got even tighter. All that I said about I was prepared, and there wasn't a doubt in my mind of how my journey would, how I would make choices along my journey, doesn't mean I was exempt from, like, all the fears. I still had
of
the
course.
crazy, like, this is what I'm doing. I'm not going to see a doctor. I'm not going to get any testing. I'm just going to lay in bed again today.
My joke about my pregnancy is that, like, every couple of days, Johnny would come home from work and I would be like, I am positive my baby doesn't have a face.
Yeah.
Like, I would just be like, oh, I got total clarity today. The baby's definitely fucked up,
Got a tail.
Yeah, exactly. And just, that work of being like, and
Yep.
So maybe.
Exactly. And it is work. And I do think it's not just, sometimes it's kind of like received when people hear these stories, like, oh, wow, she's so lucky. That's so lucky. You're so lucky that everything went fine. But I really don't think it's just luck. Like, it's work. It takes work. It took a lot of meditation every single day. It took a lot of self-reflection. It took a lot of, like, checking in. Okay, am I just scared right now? Do I actually feel that something is wrong?
Like, how to distinguish between fear and intuition. And that is such a confusing untangling for so many people, because who's taught that growing up?
Exactly. We're taught, like, you won't be able to distinguish, so go with, like, something's wrong and just get it checked out.
And you definitely don't know anything about your own body.
Yeah, exactly.
So what choices did you make? Did you see a midwife? What was it like?
I didn't see a midwife. I didn't see any doctors. I see an herbalist. So I saw my herbalist every once in a while to pick up herbs. Herbal plant allies were a big part of my journey, like, especially nutrition, that prenatal care that I was offering to myself. Nutrition played a huge part in that. I had a really strong and steady meditation practice every single day. I was meditating. Movement practice was really big for me. I didn't have any medical testing done. I carried on with life. I continued to go to what was appealing. Like I said, my circle did get smaller. I didn't want to go to as many social gatherings kind of naturally. I did want to hang out with mothers.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to hang out with them and their kids. I went to women's song circles. That was a big part of my nutrition.
And how did you assemble your birthing team?
So my birthing team, I had just 2 of my closest friends. Actually, I should say, along that journey, my original plan was, well, of course, the woman I apprenticed with will be my midwife. She will have to be there. And then halfway through my pregnancy, she was going through a lot of personal stuff in her life, and it became really clear that she wouldn't be able to be at my birth. And I totally went through this, like, so like such a victim of this situation mentality, like, poor me, like, where's my midwife? I'm the midwife for people and I have no midwife, boo-hoo. And that, it was so strong that I had to really sit with it and ask myself, what is she going to offer me at the birth that I am feeling such a victim of missing out on? What is it?
But it's so legit,
Yeah.
it is. And I know everyone gets so confused about this, but it's so, so primal to crave a spiritual guide through a new experience, that's so, and obviously this easily spins us into the conversation of authentic midwifery and the need for authentic midwifery and the work of authentic midwifery versus the just lie of, obstetrical midwifery and the lie that it sells to women. But it is so understandable and so normal, and what most women crave, whether they have the language for it or not, is a spiritual guide, a female spiritual guide through this initiation into motherhood. And it obviously gets super sabotaged because the air quotes spiritual guides now are like male perverts and like, just, like it's so weird now what's happening. But, so yeah, I mean, I hear you, and that is the work of, and that's such a great question to ask. Like, okay, she's not available. So how do we make it not about her, but rather what is the thing I was looking for, and can I find it in another way?
Exactly. And yeah, she was such a natural choice because, and I think that natural choice often is someone who is like a mother figure.
Or a
She's
big
familiar
sister.
to me, a big sister figure. Like, she was the village midwife who I knew because we had established this comfort with each other. We knew each other. She was a teacher to me. Yeah, so much comfort there. There's so much comfort there. But yeah, in asking that question, I was able to say, like, what's the essence of the support that I actually want with me? And it came down to sisterhood, wanting like sisters who I'm comfortable with and who have known me on my journey and who I want to continue to know me on my journey and know this part of it. A desire to be witnessed. I really did want to be witnessed. And I think this is like hugely important in these rites of passage, these major transitions in our life where we move from one phase to another. We're so lacking in our culture the ceremony and the ritual around it that helps us then embody that new role that we're going to play, and the community witnesses who are there to say, I saw you do that, yes, and like I am here to say yes, like you are in that role because you went through the fire.
And to remember that story with you is so
Exactly.
beautiful. And I know that people get very confused and misinterpret the concept of free birth as it's these weird women over here that want to be alone and unwitnessed. And obviously they're so wrong. I don't know if I've ever met a woman who has explicitly voiced, I want to be unwitnessed. I think a lot of women fantasize about what it would be to be alone. And of course, I know lots of women who have chosen to free birth truly alone. But to be honest, most of those women, it wasn't a choice from an abundance of support. And they still made that choice. It was from a deep lack of support. And so, in embracing that, okay, and it's different to fantasize about being alone, or how many of us, fantasize about a birth outside, but very few women actually choose that, which is not a judgment call. It's just kind of what winds up happening most of the time, as we tend to den up, in our rooms or our bathrooms. But anyway, so you were able to find and call in the sisters of trust that were there to witness you.
They stepped right up, and it was just so clear once I asked them, like, of course, these two women, like, it'll be so perfect. I had been One was the original woman who I said her birth that really like catalyzed my entrance into
Oh,
traditional
nice.
midwifery and was my introduction to the woman I apprenticed with. She was at the birth.
The
And
one who lost the baby.
The one who lost the baby, yeah.
Wow.
And another really good friend who I was the first person who came over to her house after she gave birth, you know, in power outside of the system. And we have this really strong sisterhood, and it just made so much sense. You know, we meet for moon circles. Why not have my moon circle sisters? They're my coven. They're going to be at my birth. Yeah. So that was perfect. And, you know, they were game for what I wanted. Really what I wanted was like the nurturing, someone to be able to hand me the cup of tea, you know, and clean up after the birth, and like look at my husband if he's feeling uneasy and just like give the calm, reassuring look. And because they had given birth in this way on their own, they had that trust in it. And so they were just the perfect sisters to come and, you know, wield no authority whatsoever and not imagine that they knew better than me in any way, but be able to just offer me tender love and care.
So how did it go?
It went so great. It honestly went just like exactly as I had imagined and manifested throughout the end of my pregnancy. I really had this like fantasy that I would just carry on with my life as normal until I absolutely couldn't. And then I would, you know, lay in my bed at some point and get in the tub at some point and get in the birth pool at some point and just give birth to my baby. And it would happen at night. And it really unfolded like that. I mean, in the last few weeks of pregnancy, I found I was very dreamy and spacey and totally like I could feel that I was entering another realm. You know, like we would go on walks in the woods and I'd be like, the trees are literally talking to me, like their spirits are just showing themselves and speaking to me. And like
that's awesome.
Everything is so vibrant. And in my home, like every single day for months leading up to the birth, I was seeing these tiny fairy beings all over the house. You know, it started as like, oh, I don't think that's what I actually saw. It was probably a giant fly out of the corner of my eye. But then it was like, no, I'm actually seeing these beings out of the corners of my eye every day, at least once a day. And so when I went into labor, I was I was in a very dreamy state. My husband was off work already. It was great. We went out to the farmer's market. We went to like 2 farmer's markets. I went to a crafter's. Multiple people told me that day. I was 38 weeks and 5 days from conception at this point, and lots of people were like, you're not going to have that baby for a month. Like, you're just too comfortable. You're too happy. You're walking all over town, you know, like the silly things that people say at the end of pregnancies. And
that's generous to call those silly.
Yeah. It was. You're right. That was really nice. But I felt good. I felt so happy and content, and I did feel strong. I, you know, went for a 3K hike the day before.
But 38 weeks from conception means 40. So like from the other metric, you were like 40 and 5.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But feeling good. You know, really feeling good. And so I came home from the crafters and made love with my husband that afternoon. And literally right after making love, I was like, I think I have to take a shit. Like,
that's so romantic.
So nice. I was like, sorry, I gotta get out of bed right away.
That's awesome.
And sat on the toilet and did not have to poop, but really like felt my baby drop into the pelvis right there. And like, I remember grabbing the towel bar and being like, whoa,
yeah,
this is different. And I had sensations right away. As soon as I stood up from the toilet, I started having contractions that were totally different than anything that I had felt, you know, little whatever hints of contractions and preparations in the last few weeks. And they were every 5 minutes right from that get-go for the first few hours. And my husband was going out the door to go surfing, and I was on all fours in the living room being like, oh, whoa, feeling my way into these new sensations. And he stopped at one point and looked at me and was like, wait, like, should I be going surfing? Are you in labor right now? What's going on? And because I had this fantasy of carrying on with my life until I absolutely couldn't, I was like, it's fine. And I was like in this really dreamy state. I was like, go surfing. I'm fine.
The fairies got me.
I'm here with the fairies. Don't worry. And I had actually dinner plans that night to have dinner with the two women I had asked to be at my birth. And funny enough, the woman who I had originally apprenticed with, who was in town for 16 hours, and we were having dinner with her.
Cute.
So I said, go ahead, my ladies are picking me up for dinner. Don't surf for too long. Keep your phone on you. I'm fine. Bye. So he left because he'll take any opportunity to go for a surf. And I went to dinner, and, my sensations spaced out to about 7 minutes apart, maybe 8 minutes apart, something like that. But I didn't tell anyone. I love keeping secrets to myself. Like,
whoa.
I just love it. And like, I didn't even tell my husband I was pregnant for a week. And after I knew, I told him.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is like the opposite of my personality. Wow.
Scorpio South Node. I can't help myself. So throughout dinner, it just was kind of like,
with your birth attendant.
With my birth attendant.
That's amazing. Wow.
Eating my buttered chicken and, kind of moving around on the chair, like, ooh, I'm not comfortable like this anymore. I got to move on. Got to get like that. And, I got up to do the dishes at the end and was washing some dishes. And at one point while I was washing the dishes, I was just like, what am I doing? I can't focus on doing these dishes anymore. I don't want to do these dishes anymore. This is stupid. I got to get out of here. I got to go home. And so at that point, I went to pee, and then I came back out, and my mucus plug had released. When I went to pee, I realized, because there was like a little bit of brownish, dark red, blood, mucus plug stuff going on. So I came out and told them, everybody get some sleep. I'm going to go home. I will be calling you later tonight. I suspect I'm in labor. And then they're like, one's like, what? And one's like, I knew it. And one's like, you wore lipstick. You never wear lipstick. I knew something was different. So they all had their kind of suspicions, and I got a ride home. And at that point, my sensations were every 5 to 4 minutes apart. I got home, and my husband was back from surfing, and I called him along the way to give him a heads up. And I came home, and he I had given him this list of things I wanted done, like take the beautiful organic cotton sheets off the bed and make my labor aid and things like that. So I came back, and he was like doing dishes, laundry on the go, sheets off the bed, labor aid going, like just was in task mode. He's a pilot. So he's like, give me a task and I'll just follow the protocol. Thank you very much. So he was in like protocol mode. And I got in the bathtub and labored in the bathtub for a while. That felt really nice. My sensations started to get really close together. When they were like 2 minutes apart and I wasn't catching much rest in between them, I really wanted Sean, my husband, beside me. And he was like, maybe I should should I call them? And even at that point, even though like all my experience in birth, sensations are 2 minutes apart, I'm not catching much rest in between. When he called them, I was still like, but take your time. Don't worry about getting here too fast.
You're like, take your time.
Exactly.
There's hair, but no big deal.
Don't worry about it. Just a head. So they were like, okay, yeah, we're going to come over. And at that point I got out of the tub and sat on the toilet and had a pee. And that was a really nice release for me. I had like just a cry, I just cried sitting on the toilet, Sean in front of me, leaning on his shoulder, and let out just like, the enormity of what I was feeling. Like, I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen. Like, holy shit, it's actually happening. I'm scared.
Mm-hmm.
Was the essence of it. And the cry was really good. Like, that release just felt so nice. And then I climbed in bed, and at that point I did want to be touched. So I wanted to just be like snuggled and spooned. Sean got in bed with me, and while we were in bed, the ladies arrived and they set up the birth pool and got it all filled up and topped up my teas. And my eyes were shut at this point. But I remember each of them one at a time coming in my room and like sitting on the floor by my feet and just touching my feet while I went through some sensations, or sitting on the floor beside me and passing me my tea, or rubbing my back really gently. I threw up too. So at one point, one of the women came in and, she had a bowl for me and was like, no big deal, just puke, just get it all out. So it was like, it felt really tender and sweet when they showed up, and I could sense that they had come into my house, but they were just like, were quietly working, and
it was just the
so
two
nice.
of them, not the woman you.
It was the three of them. So It ended up being my two friends who I had invited. And then, the woman who I had originally apprenticed with came as well.
Cute. And that felt good.
And it felt good. It felt really good. So they got the birth pool ready. And while I was on the bed, then I was having a really hard time getting comfortable. My sensations were like right on top of each other. I was totally in transition. I was like shaking. My husband kept putting a blanket on me because I was shivering, and I kept throwing it off. And I was like, no blanket. But, not saying like, I don't need a blanket. I'm in transition. It's just like, stop putting the blanket on me.
It's like, I'm cold, no blanket. I'm shivering, no blanket.
No blanket. Thank you.
That's funny.
And then the pool was ready. At this point, I had been in labor. My first sensation was at like 4:00 in the afternoon. At this point, it was like 1:30 in the morning. And then I got into the birth pool around 2:00 in the morning. And that walk, I live in a very small space, and the pool was in our spare room across the hall. And that walk from my bed to the birth pool across the hall, which was like, I don't know, 5 meters, something like that, was like, I paused so many times in the walk, and then went to put a toe in the tub and got a sensation and was like on the floor, and just in my mind in that moment was like, I'll never get in the tub. Like, it will just never happen. I can never move again. It's just like, it felt so big to make those small movements from the outside perspective. So I stayed on the floor for a little bit, right in front of my altar, which was so great to be in front of my altar that I had meditated at every single day in this pregnancy. And eventually I did get up and get in the birth pool, and that was like such a relief. I'm a water sign, I'm a Pisces, and the water is such comfort for me, and it felt so good to be in there, and it felt like my zone, and I hadn't originally asked Sean to get in, but he got in the pool, but he just kind of stayed on one side, and I didn't really want to be touched or anything. But I liked having him really close by. And the women were in the room and would leave sometimes and get drinks, or, just take turns so there weren't as many people in the room. And I moved through the next 2 hours of my labor in the pool. Sometimes they sang, sometimes they ommed. Sometimes I wanted it quiet. And then eventually I got this, like, the most intense part of the birth for me was not when Ren came out. It wasn't when my daughter came out, but it was when I felt her drop from my pelvis into the birth canal. And I remember like leaning over the side of the pool for so long, but then at that point having to like get upright and like, whoo, and with my eyes closed, I didn't realize I wanted to move. And I just like crawled in the pool and went to a spot. And I realized later that I had crawled to like the farthest corner in the room with my back facing everyone, with my eyes closed. And that's where I wanted to be. And my waters started bulging out. I really wanted her to come down, and I tried to break my waters with my fingers, and like those suckers they're hard. So it didn't work the first time. But on my next sensation, when they were really bulging out hard, I broke them with my fingernails. And after that, she came her head was then coming out. She started crowning. And once I could feel her head coming out of me, it was maybe 4 or 5 sensations of it, like, retracting a bit, coming down a little more, retracting a bit, coming down a little more. And then my body was already pushing. I had not consciously pushed at any point in the labor. At this point, my body was doing all of the pushing. And, 2 pushes. Once her head came halfway out, I thought to myself, I'm going to get behind the next one. I pushed once, her whole head came out. I pushed on the next sensation, her body came right out. And so she was born in the water, and I was leaning forward. She kind of started to float behind me, and my husband knew that I wanted to be the first one to touch her. So he said, I didn't see this because he's behind me, but he says he was like shuffling the water, like paddling the water so the baby would float forward.
That's hysterical. That's so cute.
Like, I wish I had
totally. It's like, not touching. Not touching her.
I didn't touch her. And I just scooped her up, and she let out a little squawk and then a cry, and then was quiet and just nursed right away. And I believe my first words were "holy shit," but holy shit. It was great. They left me, everyone kind of like left the room so that the 3 of us could be alone for a little while. And then I got out and had a bath and then climbed into bed. So good. They rubbed my feet and pulled on my wool socks, and we had a little cord burning ceremony. And the next day, another woman came and gave me a massage and a closing of the bone ceremony while another sister sang to me. And
so sweet.
It was so sweet. It was so beautiful. It was so simple. It was so straightforward. Yeah.
So how has that informed your birth keeping since?
I think the biggest impact that it's had on me is, before giving birth, the parts of the journey that I saw as being really important, but that there really is no focus on in our culture: the ceremonies, the rituals, the mother blessings, the sisterhood circle that's there for you at the birth, the postpartum village that shows up with meals, the first outing and like song circle or whatever you go to, the closing of the bone ceremony, a naming ceremony, whatever people choose to do. Like the ritual and the ceremony is really missing. And I saw that it was very important before, but with clients, if they weren't totally on board with it, I was like, okay, we'll skip that stuff. It's okay. We don't have to incorporate it. And now, after going through that journey and feeling what those rituals infused me with, feeling how those ceremonies helped me to go through the transition,
to integrate
it and embody the new role of being a mother, the new status in society, the new responsibilities, the new privileges. It's like, now it's just not an option for me with my clients. I'm like, this is what we do. That's a huge part of what I do. If you're hiring me, you want ritual, you want ceremony.
I'm going to sing to you.
I'm definitely going to sing to you. Absolutely. I'm definitely going to rub your feet. You're not getting out of it.
I'm sure there's been very little resistance to that. Who doesn't want to be sung to and have their feet rubbed? Yeah. And that's such a good point. I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think that a lot of women and newer birth attendants, and just women in general, have this real programmed sense of not wanting to impose and not wanting to, it's like, let the mother lead. And yes, of course, let the mother lead. It's her life, of course. And know what you bring to the table, and embody the role of the midwife, of the shamanic guide, like really do it. Let yourself have it. And it doesn't have to be song. If you don't relate to song, it can be something else. But the tenets of womanhood, the tenets of sisterhood are largely rooted in things like song and touch and gathering and meal and cooking and cleaning. And I mean, some really like core tenets, not as like a gendered oppressive thing, but as a, women gather, we cook for each other, we clean each other's homes, we tend to each other's children, we touch each other, we sing to each other, and yet we don't actually do that. But when we do it, and now we have to do it in these, like, here's a retreat, you're going to go do this for 7 days, or whatever, and then that's fine and that's beautiful, and that is what we're like all trying to reclaim. But yeah, that element of owning what you bring to the table, and that part of what you bring to the table as you become this embodied mother and birth attendant is to say, this is actually a part of what I'm helping guide you back into, and really to own that space, because we do all want that from each other, but we don't really know how to ask for it. And so we, as the birth attendants or the doulas or the midwives or the postpartum doulas, whatever role we're taking on, instead of 100% deferring to the mom, it's actually quite important that we really learn and embody the beautiful, like, womanhood skill sets that we do all have, and not be afraid to really bring them and offer them, not in like a weird pushy way, of course. And I know, like, everyone's so afraid of being pushy, or, well, I'm going to wait to be invited over. And it's like, yeah, but like, no one's going to mind you putting a lasagna on their front step and sending a text. Like, find the way, do the thing, do it,
Exactly. While you're having the conversation about what a woman wants in her postpartum healing, rub her feet, touch her hair,
make the
rub
first
her
move,
hands.
like, be like, this is how it can be. And no one's going to ask you, will you rub my feet? Like,
exactly.
No reality.
But if you say, can I rub your feet? She's gonna say,
okay,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a different journey to going through your pregnancy and birth journey in the medical system. It just is completely different. It is not hiring a radical birth keeper, hiring a birth attendant outside of the system is not just finding someone outside of the system who you're more in line with to be the authority that shows up at your birth as a medical professional would.
Right. Doing it wrong.
It's doing it wrong. That's not what we want to do here. It's such a different journey. It's finding that person who will be your companion along your journey.
It's saying yes to sisterhood.
Yeah. It's saying yes to sisterhood. Totally. And sisterhood isn't always like, okay, whatever you want. Okay, whatever you want. Sometimes it's like, well, let's go for a walk while we have this talk, because, like, let's get out of the house. Sometimes it's saying, I would love to just gather your sisters together and organize a blessing for you.
Right. Being empowered together.
It's taking charge. Yeah, being empowered together, and having that confidence in ourselves and knowing our skill sets and knowing what resonates and works for us, so that we can then share that with the women who resonate with us.
Right. I think I coach a lot of new birth workers who are trying to find their place in all of this. And it seems like a really common theme is that they are afraid to speak, or afraid to do anything because they are afraid that it's somehow going to take away the woman's authority. And I understand the point. Like, I get what they're saying. And yet people don't want us to be at births to be silent. People want me at a birth because they trust me that I'm going to speak up and move and shift and act in a way that is in integrity with the space. And a huge lesson that I've really come to know in the last couple of years is that to be in integrity with myself, first and foremost, absolutely means speaking up. And the most important piece to that is knowing that I'm in enough trust with this woman that when I speak up, it comes with no expectation that they're going to listen to me, but I can't not speak up. I've been to births where I've said, I just have to say this. If this were me, given what is happening, I would transfer. I need to say that so that it's been said, so that I'm in integrity with myself. Now, whatever you want to do, I'm with you, and that's the piece that I think in all of this talk of reclaiming sisterhood that we need to actually practice in and out of the birth room. Just like if a friend is in an abusive relationship, I would say, look, to be in integrity with myself, I need to voice that I am seeing these things. They concern me, blah, 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 blah. If it were me, blah, blah, blah. And it's your life. And so both can happen at the same time. And that's where I think, we need more practice as sisters of that speaking, that, like you said, being tight and being in trust and being sisters does not mean that we're yes women. It actually means the opposite of that. It means that we are all bringing ourselves completely to our friendships and to our spaces. And there's no denying. And actually, I think it could be quite dangerous to deny the fact that if someone's inviting you into their birth, it's because they have a deep trust in you, and that they very likely see you as an expert in the birth landscape. And so to be in integrity with that and to be in responsibility with that means you have to get really right with who you are in that room. And to act like you aren't a really powerful presence is to deny this truth and the sensitivity of the space. And that doesn't equal that you're the decision maker. But like you said, it might mean, all right, girlfriend, get out of the tub. Get out of the tub. This is getting stale. I'm going to say something here. And of course she can look at me and say, no, I don't want to get out of the tub.
It happens
but
to
usually
me sometimes.
It's like, right. Yeah, totally. I love when women say no, because they should know that of course they can. But at the same time, I'm also not, if something's moving through me to say, babe, get up. You've been laying because you're avoiding what's about to happen. Go on the toilet. Your water's going to break. There's a baby to be born. It's going to be okay. I'm with you. Let's do this.
Totally.
That is actually the sisterly thing to do. And we can't be afraid, to say stuff, because speaking is not taking away someone's authority. That's not the same thing, but there's a lot of confusion around that right now.
So much confusion around that. That is huge, huge, huge. And I really drew strength from the women at my birth. Like, physically, it was coming to me from them. And the comfort that I had when in the moments when I thought to myself, like, this is absolutely insane, I can't do this, which I think every woman thinks at some point in her labor. It's like a built-in part of it. By having them there and thinking to myself, like, they did this. They gave birth in power in their homes. I can do this too. Like, this woman did it. This woman did it. This woman did it. All of the women in this room have done it. I can do it. And absolutely, when women hire us to be at their births, they want us to speak up and say that to them when they're in their moment of doubt. I see you. You are so strong and you are doing it. Let me help you to the bathroom.
Which is why it's so, and part of why it's so broken now is that women are going to strange places with men they do not know. And there's no one to hold that torch for them. There's no, like a stranger man in a white coat that's so important, like he's your guide. He's the thing between your legs. Like, come on. I mean, you deserve better. My God.
So much better.
You deserve the story that Kate just told, that there's these women circling around, taking care of you and your partner and singing to you and rubbing you and there to look you in your eyes when you need it. And also there to melt into the back of the room as you turn your back and do your work. Like, it's, your story is so beautiful and so like perfect. And it also is bringing me like this just epic heartache that is just not what most women know, and of course that's why we need to tell your story. And that's why it needs to be lifted, because it's I hope it will serve as such a deep, like, remembering of what birth can be and what a circle of women can be, and what, like you said, because of the birth work and because of the work you've done, the inside out work you've done as a birth attendant, how that was such an integrated way of setting you up for the birth experience you had. I mean, it is just this continuum.
Totally. It is a continuum. And I do think it's hard if a woman is just coming to the idea of stepping outside of the system in some way and living sovereignly and taking responsibility for her decisions only when she gets pregnant. It's, I think, a harder journey because it is.
I mean, yeah, it's a big
huge learning curve on a limited amount of time while there's lots of other stuff going on. But that personal work, doing that personal work throughout life is all going to contribute to having the beautiful birth. Once we've confronted our shadow sides, when we know ourselves better, when we can admit what we need help with, what we need for comforts.
And practicing centering yourself and, putting yourself first and these forbidden concepts.
Or setting aside the money to just hire the help that we want. Even that is such a huge leap for so many people, but yeah, I just was like, okay, I'm going to have to save up this amount of money in this amount of time because that's the care and the help that I need. So we make it happen, like centering ourselves as being important enough and worthy enough of that care, our fantasies. I think our fantasies are really like where we need to be moving towards here.
Totally. So good. Anything else you want to say or share before we close?
I guess just how grateful I am to have had a circle of women welcome me in when I was a young birth keeper and I was disenchanted with the system and I was saying, no, I'm not doing it anymore. To hear that call back into this work and then to be received by a circle of experienced birth attendants who were generous with their knowledge and treated me as an equal and asked what my opinion was, and who I could call on the phone and ask questions when I was starting to attend births on my own. That was so meaningful and special. And I hope that every birth keeper on their journey can find that support circle in some way, in person or virtually online. Like the private members group is really great for that. The Radical Birth Keeper calls are a really awesome way to start having those debriefing circles if we don't have the women face to face in our lives who we can talk to about that stuff. And
we can recreate our circles in lots of different ways.
Sisterhood is important along this journey of remembering all of these deep women's folk arts.
Well, it's imperative. I don't actually think you can come to completion with it without it. So many women contact me and say, I was totally alone until I heard you talk, until I found the podcast, until I started paying attention to you guys. I had all these same thoughts, but I never heard anybody say them too. And so what happens in that connection point when somebody, when a woman out there's floating around thinking she's alone in this way of thinking, and then hears other women around the world saying the same stuff, like that is a spark of sisterhood that normalizes and gives so much permission and love and support to each other. It can just look so many different ways, but it's absolutely critical.
And embracing those women who we find inspiring, like the elders in these lines of work. They're not extinct. They still exist. They're still out there. They're like kind of living myths at this point and are being erased, but honoring them and learning from them and buying their books and, getting in touch with them to learn, I think is so valuable, and preserving that knowledge. I see a bright future with all of that.
Well, thank you so much for all that you shared today. It was a beautiful, beautiful time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's it for today, everyone. Join us next week for another episode of the Free Birth Podcast. Thanks for joining us, and remember, your body, your choice. Lots of love.